Moments of inspiration mixed with time to network, IBJ Media Events has you covered. From industry deep dives to awards celebrating Indiana's top leaders, see what's coming up and reserve your seat at ibj.com/RSVP.
Hey, it's Pete the Planner with an emergency podcast. Now, don't feel alarmed. This isn't me trying to freak you out. It's not even really cynicism. It's just a word keeps popping up in my newsfeed this morning. I thought you and I should talk about it. And by you and I talk about it, I mean I talk about it and you just sit back and listen for a little bit. So the word that's been popping up again and again this morning for me is a word we really haven't had to deal with seriously in decades: stagflation. And the reason it's showing up right now is simple: oil prices. The conflict involving Iran has sent oil prices sharply higher, with crude briefly pushing close to $120 per barrel as markets worry about supply disruptions in the Middle East. Now, if you're thinking, Pete, why does something happening thousands of miles away affect my budget here at home? Well, the answer is that energy is one of the most important inputs in the global economy. And when energy prices spike, weird things can start happening economically, which brings us back to that scary word, stagflation. The strange thing is it sounds like a fun word, but it's the furthest thing from fun. It's an economic situation where three bad things happen at the same time. Not like watching me sing, dance, and act. No, prices going up, economic growth slows, and unemployment rises. Normally, those things don't happen together. Usually, when the economy slows down, inflation falls. But stagflation breaks that rule. It's like the economic equivalent of your car. The engine stalls, the gas pedal sticks, and somehow the gas price doubles. Well, that's stagflation. And historically, the thing that has triggered stagflation more than anything is oil shocks. Here's why oil matters so much. It's almost everything in our economy. Not literally inside the product, but inside the cost structure. It affects transportation, obviously, manufacturing, agriculture, airlines, shipping, plastics, fertilizer, and electricity in some regions. So when oil jumps quickly, companies face a tough decision. They either raise prices or they absorb the cost and cut profits. Now, most of the time they raise prices, and then that feeds directly into inflation. Right now, the market is nervous because about 20% of the world's oil supply moves through the Strait of Hormuz, which is right next to Iran. And if you've read the news recently, that's problematic. If shipping through that canal gets disrupted, global energy supply tightens really quickly, which is what's happening. Stocks fell, oil surged, bond markets got jumpy because investors know how this movie can go. Let's take a lesson from the 1970s. The last time Americans really dealt with stagflation was during that time. And back then, oil prices spiked, inflation surged, the economy slowed, and then the stock market struggled for years, and policymakers had a brutal dilemma. Normally, if the economy slows, the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates. But if inflation is rising, the Fed has to raise rates. Stagflation traps policymakers in the middle. They can't easily stimulate growth without making inflation worse. And that's why markets get nervous when the word stagflation appears. Now, let me calm this down just a little bit, because people do fear inflation, but that doesn't mean we're about to experience it. There are three big questions right now. Number one, how long does the conflict last? If it resolves quickly, oil prices could fall just as fast as they rose. Are oil supplies actually disrupted? Markets sometimes react to fear faster than actual shortages. And number three, does the price spike last? A short spike hurts, but a long spike changes economic behavior. Right now, economists are watching those variables really closely. A prolonged disruption could push inflation higher and slow growth, which is why stagflation fears are creeping back into the conversation, but we're not there quite yet. So here's what it means for you. For households, the first place you'll notice this kind of shock is energy costs, gasoline, airfare, shipping costs that eventually show up in everyday goods. And if oil stays elevated, the biggest risk is cost of living pressure. And that's really what people mean when they talk about stagflation, not some abstract economic theory, but the feeling that everything costs more, paychecks don't stretch as far, and the economy feels uncertain. Does this sound familiar? A lot of Americans already feel that way after the inflation of the last few years. So here's the bottom line. Stagflation is a risk scenario. It's not a prediction. Markets are reacting to a geopolitical event that could affect global energy supplies, and energy shocks have historically been one of the fastest ways to create inflation pressure. But whether this turns into a temporary scare or something bigger depends mostly on one thing: how long the conflict lasts and whether oil supply actually gets disrupted. I guess that's two things. If it's short-lived, markets move on. If it drags on, the economic conversation starts to change. So for now, the best thing you can do is exactly what good financial planning has always required of you. Control what you can control. Spend thoughtfully. Maintain flexibility. And don't let scary economic words dictate your decisions, even if they're dressed as a fun-sounding word like stagflation. Because sometimes the economy looks a lot scarier in headlines than it does in real life. I'm Pete the Planner.
Get a behind-the-scenes look at Indiana's most influential leaders. On Business and Beyond, we go beyond titles and resumes to explore the personal stories, pivotal moments, and hard-won lessons that shape Hoosier leadership. Hear from the people driving Indiana forward in their own words. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcast or at ibjpodcasts.com.
The IBJ Media Podcast Network is the soundtrack of a growing state. Indiana is on the move, and you can hear it happening on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. We bring you the voices at the center of our economy, our courts, our companies, and our communities. Subscribe now and be part of the conversation that's building Indiana's future. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcasts.com.